It is so good to be here with all of you today. My colleague Jeff Smith wanted me to be able to say two things. His Twitter handle is JMUJeff, so I'll give you a guess as to two things. Go Dukes on the one side, and a shout out to the Harrisonburg Blue Streaks on the other. So it is great. Yeah, there we go. So we build better leaders, and sometimes we get called by organizations when they're in trouble and the heat is on. And sometimes we get called when the vision has been cast and people are trying to figure out how it is to make it true, right? And sometimes we get called when it's been going so well and it's been going so hot and heavy that the organization is growing so fast that people are trying to figure out how to keep pace with it. Out of all of those experiences, here's the thing I've learned. Your greatest asset in your organization is the imagination of the people inside it. And I want to talk with you today about how to unlock that imagination. I'll start with a story. It's across a conference room table, and the person across from me is the number 2 in the organization. And he's been talking for a while, and the story really gets going, and I can see the anger actually start to rise. And I can see the frustration start coming through, and I can see the wrestling in him. Until finally, he puts his hands on the table and he leans across it and he says, Jennifer, here's the thing. I walk in and out that door every single day. And I go in there and I have all of this capacity that I want to share and pour out, all of this talent that I want to give to this organization. And by the time I walk out the door every single day, I've given 5% of what I'm capable of. And I am so frustrated. Wow. I've been in that seat. Maybe you have too. Been inside an organization in a place where you had all of these ideas, all this capacity, all of this imagination and competence and opportunity, and you want to pour it out and you want to be able to give it and you want to be able to use it, and you can even see how. You can even see how if you did this one thing, everything would be different. Or if you started this, it would make all of the difference in the results the next time around. But for whatever reason, the organization doesn't allow you to give your talent. What's happening in that moment? What do you do? And he was across the table from me. And so I knew two things in that moment. I could feel his frustration, and I had a lot of compassion for him. And I also knew that it was going to be okay. And I knew it was going to be okay because I was coaching the number 1 inside that organization. He'd actually engaged us the year before, and he had engaged us intentionally so that he could build the creative capacity of the organization. He wanted to be able to unleash the power and possibility and potential of everybody there. He didn't know how. He was learning. He was learning. And so I walked him through the rest of the conversation that we had, helping him shape another conversation, one to take back to his colleague and leader, to be able to begin to find a way for him to unleash more and more of his capacity inside of the organization. What if it's true that every day, walking in and out, the people on your teams have twice as much, or 3 times as much, or 20 times as much to give? But for whatever reason, they're not able to. And what if you could unlock that? It takes a couple of things to unlock the creative capacity of an organization. It takes time, and it takes trust. And so I'm going to pause for a moment today and talk to you about both of those things, time and trust. Time to think and trust on the team. Time to think. When was the last time you had white space in your calendar? I know mine, right? When was the last time you had time to really think deeply about what you were doing and how you were doing it and to think about what was going on in the world around you, and if you were relevant, if it mattered, if you were still doing the right thing based on what's happening out there. Right? Time to really think. Time to think is an endangered species in business today. Yeah, it's true. And I believe that the greatest differentiator in success stories today between where we are right now and who will be succeeding tomorrow is this: the organizations that equip and allow their people and themselves time to think, a regular rhythm of thinking time inside of itself, right? And with the people that are there, if they value that, those organizations will be successful. And the other ones will fall into decline. Because the pace is not sustainable, the time to think is absolutely critical. Time to think. I actually don't do strategic planning with people. I do strategic thinking. I equip organizations to think strategically. And a piece of that is the pace of it, right? Who has the time? We work in an organization, and we met with them a couple of weeks ago, and the VP came in and sat down, and he said, "This is what I've got for the team today." We were meeting with all the VPs in this healthcare organization. And he's like, "This is what I did with my team. It's so exciting. I want to share it." I asked everybody on my team when we met last, I said, "I want you to go to your calendar, and I want you to erase 10% of your meeting time. However you do it, I'm leaving that up to you, right? You're free to figure it out. But I want you to erase 10% of your meeting time, and then I want you to take that time and I want you to plant it. I want you to plant it in your own thinking. I want you to give it to yourself, because this organization has challenges before it and opportunities around it, and we're not going to be able to think clearly and brightly about them unless we have time to think. And so I want you to do this exercise and come back and let me know what you find and what happens." So we need to find a way to have time to think so that we can be successful inside of our organizations, to make sure that we have the right pace for thinking. So there's time to think. There's another side too, beyond just time to think, but it also takes our time, and that's building trust on the team, right? Trust on the team is really important. You can have all the time that you want to think about things, and people can have all the creative ideas in the world, but if they don't trust you, they won't give it to you. Because I think we're aware inside of each and every one of us that your greatest gift is your creative imagination. So why would you share it if you didn't trust the people around you, right? When you trust people, you share your ideas freely. You talk openly. You really engage, and you're willing to be stretched and have your ideas reshaped, right? When you trust people, people can mess with you when you trust them. And our ideas are precious, and so we want people to mess with them, but we only want the people we trust to mess with them a lot. So trust on a team is really essential to an organization. How you build that, though, takes some time and attention. So here's a couple of things that you can do to spend that time and pay attention to trust on your team. It takes a couple of things. It takes curiosity. Being curious about your people, being curious about who they are and how they are and what they're up to and interested in. Simply being curious about them. Not about what they can do for you, but about what their dreams and desires are, what they aspire to, what they want, what they really want. That's a piece of information that they will apply untold amounts of energy to, but you need to know what that is, right? It's helpful. Once you know, when you're curious about people, right, knowing what their aspirations are, then when you begin to have a conversation, changes the tone. Takes an investment, though, an investment in your time. The next time you're asking questions of people, don't ask questions you already have the answer for, try to sway them to your point of view. Ask a purely curious question, a generous question, a question for which you have no answer. That's a generous question, right? What should we do next is not a generous question if you have the idea in mind. But a desperate, what should we do next, is different. Right? But a generous question, right? What do you want? What do you really want out of your life, right? What are you really good at? What are your favorite things to do? What do you want to learn about? So I would be making a mistake if I didn't take the time while I was here today to talk with you about an organization that's bringing both of these things together. They're figuring out both time and trust, and they're creating a creative environment. So the organization that I wanted to talk with you about is an organization that is, I actually asked Michael, the president, if I could share their story. And that was before I saw that they were written up this month actually in Virginia Business and in the Roanoke Times in the last little bit. Robotics. Torque Robotics is doing amazing things in the world. Torque has the capacity to build things that don't exist. That's what they do. They take things that people want, but they have no idea how to have because they don't exist in the world. We want the capacity to be able to do this, but that capacity doesn't exist in the world yet. Would you please build that for us? And then Torque goes and builds those things. They build robots, right? So we've been inside of this organization for a number of years at Torque. And when we got there, there was less than 30 people. I will tell you that the top priority from the organization, from the time that they started till now, is that the full creative capacity of each and every single person in the organization is unleashed in the organization, right? Because if you're going to build something that doesn't exist, if you're going to actually have something at the end of the day that's delivered to a customer that didn't exist in the world before you started to think about it, you need to have your people bringing their full creative power to the day every single time. And so he's invested in creating creative environments. So they do interesting things at Torque. He's got a few practices. He's got the capacity inside of the business to meet quarterly, right? He's just decided that's what he's going to do. He meets every quarter, and it's a vision meeting. And it isn't the kind of vision meeting where, let me cast the vision and tell you all about it. It's the kind of vision meeting where he asks questions about what they're engaged in and what they're curious about and what they want to find out more about, right? It's a conversation. It's not a telling. And out of that conversation, he also shares what's going on in the landscape of the world and where they might need to move and how they can put together the things that the group is curious about learning and growing and doing next and what the world needs to be built. Right? It's a dialogue, and they do it every quarter. He takes the time to invest in relationships at every single level of the organization. So it's not just the senior leadership team. He's curious about nourishing his leaders all the way through. And we meet monthly with different leadership groups inside of the business to have creative conversations about how they're doing together with one another, right? We meet with the dyad leaders. So here's two people that might not always get along: the people that design things and the people that make them do it on time and under budget. I'm just saying. Right? But we sit down with those folks and we make sure the communication is clean, right? So when you have that kind of ongoing rich dialogue, you have something really spectacular. And they take time, you'll see in their video, they take some time to paint and have fun and play. Teams that play together stay together. So my question for you all before I leave today is this: what if 95% of the talent in your organization is being left on the table? What if it's even just 10% or 50%, right? What if there's more that's possible? What would people be like if they were allowed to give it? What would you be like if you were allowed to give it, right? Here's a couple of things that you can do tomorrow. When you get back to your regular world and the regular pace of your life, you can start to create the possibility for that to be so. And the first thing is how you spend your time. I want you to go to your calendar and do two things. Grab an hour on Monday and an hour on Friday afternoon. And I want you to call that precious time that you won't negotiate thinking time. An hour for you to simply think. Set aside, right? It's important. And then if you were to grab 15 minutes on the other days to plan and prioritize, with that simple decision, I'll tell you, I work with time design all the time with people. It might take a couple of weeks for you to find an hour that you can capture. But look ahead, right? Do the exercise. Look ahead and see where you can capture it and know that it's coming. Deliver that gift to yourself in the future and have that be a repeating appointment with yourself to think. It's your most powerful time. And then if you take 15 minutes a day on the other days to sort and sift, plan and prioritize, you'll be in a different mindset. And you will have time to think. And if you communicate that throughout the organization, if you talk about that, if you help other people do it, then there's a thinking rhythm inside of the business, inside of your team. The other thing that you can do is, and I'd like to actually really ask you to do, is to make the time to have a conversation one-on-one with each and every one of your direct reports between now and Labor Day, right? And I don't want it to be the conversation where you have an extra performance conversation. And I don't want it to be a conversation where you're talking about the business. I want you to have a curious conversation about them, right? About who they are and how they are, about what they dream and desire, about their aspirations. Simply be curious about that. Not about how that it relates back to your work. Just sit with the conversation and simply listen to that other person's passionate concerns and interests, talents, things you might not even know exist inside of them. Find out what's going on over there. Simply be curious. Here's what happens. After you start carrying those stories around for a little while, you'll find that you know the aspirations of the people around you. And when you're able to plug in the aspirations of your folks with the vision that you have, magic begins to happen. And what I really want for you is magic. So with that, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been great to be here. And you're going to have a fantastic time with Steve. He is super generous. That's the thing that I've learned about him today in our curious conversations. He's super generous. Go and unlock the imaginations of the people that you work with. Have a great day, everybody.